I want to thank everybody for coming today. I'm happy to be asked to speak. I've got one small little video later on when we get to the Fascia's chocolates part of it. But in order to understand where Fascia's is, some of the things we're doing there as a very, very, very small business growing up. While we are growing, we're growing as we speak. You kind of need to understand, or maybe my background and where I came from and some of the things that I've done prior to coming in here, because it does kind of set the stage for why I'm doing certain things at this time. So again, thank you for having me. I am a born and raised Waterbury native. I went to public high school here. I graduated from Willoughby High School right here in Waterbury. Yes, a very long time ago, 1983. Back here, back in the day, Waterbury was a little different than it is today. But, when you look back on, your entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm going to touch on that a bunch. I guess, being a paper boy at 10, 11 years old, it's kind of the very first thing. It doesn't exist anymore. Almost every paper carrier, if there are any, they're driving around in a car and delivering papers. But when you're knocking door to door to collect your 60 cents or 75 cents, what it was for the week, I guess that's the beginning of your entrepreneurial spirit, because that, believe it or not, there were people who wouldn't answer the door and pay their paper bill. They'd avoid you. So that's a pretty big lesson at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old to get. Anyway, I went through high school, graduated. I don't often say it, but to context, I was valedictorian at Willoughby High School in '83, and I wanted to be an engineer. I knew that that's kind of, I like working with my hands, and I want to understand how things work. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Worcester Polytech, WPI, in Worcester, Mass. I've often said I would not be able to get into that school today. It's risen its stature enough that I don't think I could actually get there. But anyway, I went to school and realized, wow, there's a lot of smart people out there, and had to work really hard. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I was very fortunate to get an internship, summer job at what was then Connecticut Light and Power, now part of Eversource. I worked right down on Freight Street and as a summer engineer. And I was really, really fortunate to be given a project that they thought was going to take, basically they thought it was going to take 2 years of full-time people to do. Now, it had to do with analyzing the electrical lines. Anybody know what a capacitor is? This is really technical, but it's one of those gray boxes hanging out on the pole. And they help the energy stay stable. And they had these things called PCBs in them at the time. I'm not going to tell you what it means. But anyway, this oil, they had to replace it with something more environmentally better. So my job was literally every electrical line, every transmission line in the city and in the region, you had to analyze and say, well, should you replace it where it is, or should you replace it in another part? So they thought it was going to take 2 years. My first summer, I did over half the project in just the 2 months or 3 months that I was there. So they saved the rest of the project for me until I came back for my next summer. So that was good. I don't know that it was me. It could have been, or they're just way underestimated or what it would actually take. But that was a good sense of, hey, got something done. You can actually check things off. And many, many professions we go into, you don't get to check a box off. It's just kind of a perpetual thing. So I learned early on that being able to accomplish something, having a goal, and being able to get it keeps you really, really motivated. So a lesson that I've continued to carry with me is, even if I'm in a job that is, managing a company, I mean, there's long-term goals, but you have to break everything you do down into something that's a milestone. At least for a person like me, I need milestone. I need to be able to say I accomplished something. So there's always a mix of a long-term strategy and a short-term tactic, even if it's for your own motivation. Okay, so anyway, I graduated college and looked at a bunch of different, back in the mid 80s, job market wasn't phenomenal, but it was robust enough that I was fortunate enough to have 5 different job offers coming out of college, but it was all over the map. I actually got an offer from Eversource to go back, do what I did. A couple other companies, big Procter & Gamble, most people would recognize, a big consumer packaged goods. That was manufacturing engineering, so going in and running a factory. But I took a offer from General Electric, and I was on their technical sales program where they put you into a region. Now I was going to sell electrical equipment, stuff that went on industrial lines and generating stations and things like that. Now, most of you weren't around, weren't born yet. Some of you have been, to know that GE in the mid 80s was the #1 company in the world. It was the largest company in the world. If you think Amazon and you think, the biggest companies are Googles and things, that's kind of what GE was and the stature it held. And the CEO at the time, Jack Welch, maybe ring a bell and name, but just realize he was Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos rolled into one. That's how much credence people gave him. You hear terms like Six Sigma being used. That was all Jack Welch. He had lots of programs. He had always had initiatives going on. It started with workout, started with change acceleration, how to move large organizations. And GE, again, was the largest company in the world at the time. So by being on the technical sales program in GE, I was exposed and got to go to schools that they ran. It was like getting an MBA education all at the same time. The way that program worked is I was in the field sales for 1 year, and then I moved into a product business, a factory, and I went down to Roanoke, Virginia, now beautiful, down in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I was there as a factory guy to learn. Normally, you go off the program into a sales role. You're in some city somewhere, and you have a certain group of customers you're going to call on. And one of the recurring themes in any career sometimes is luck, okay? Because you have to kind of do something. If you're in the right place at the right time and you take advantage of it, then it's a really good thing. So what happened was, I'm on this technical sales program. I'm supposed to go somewhere in the country and be a sales guy. The job that my boss held was the job that you would aspire to do after you paid your dues out in the field. Probably 4 or 5 years. They wouldn't consider anybody without 5 to 6 years experience out in the field to learn the real world. Well, my boss left while I was still on the program. And again, a little bit of luck, maybe a little bit of ability. I was actually given that job. I skipped about 5 years worth of dues to pay. And the position I had was to be the factory expert, the technical expert on a product. The salespeople would be out there. They'd call it out. In my world, it was utilities. It was electrical, generating stations, and that's where we sold a lot of our product. The product I sold, even at the time, back in 1980, early $90, like $500,000. It was like $500,000, like the smallest thing that I could sell. So they weren't, quick projects. They were things that actually took quite a long time to develop and sell. But the view I got of flying all over the country and literally all over the world to sell, to be the technical expert on this product line, where the guys that were the sales guys, they were far superior in age. They were old guys. They were 30, 40, 50. Gosh, I'm 58 now. I can't imagine, right? But I'm here at 25, 26, 27, and I'm the technical expert jumping out there. It's just, again, part of its ability, but more importantly, it was the ability to see I convinced my boss. He brought me in one day and said, Mike left, and I got a on-the-spot job interview, and I got the ability to do it. So that was 5 years of great time that I did a lot. But here's one of the things I want to know. Here I am working for the largest company in the world under extremely structured, their personnel thing was, you were ranked. You knew what you were. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. They had a very, very, very specific measurement system, and it was rigorous, and it wasn't always fun. And it was whether you were high potential, medium potential, and then whether you performed well or not. So there are two different things. You can not perform well but have high potential. That's usually not the case, but you can perform well but not have potential. And that was okay. You needed those people in a business, right? To be the kind of people who, you got a job to fill and you're great at it. Just keep doing it. But guess what? You're not going to take your boss's job. So that's the way they categorize things. So I knew I was supposed to move. And out there in the sales world, the guy who was the vice president of sales for the whole organization, every time I would be near his office, which happened to be in Schenectady, New York. You know where Schenectady, New York is? A pit hole of a place, but that's where the big GE factory was. And every time I would venture into Schenectady, he would call me into his office, harshly mad, but in a nice way, that I never went out to the field because they trained me to go out to the field. And I didn't. I stayed in the product business. And I said, well, okay, if I ever want to move, I'll look you up. Well, he offered me two more jobs in the 10 years beyond that. But anyway, the point I was going to make is, as a sales guy, you're in a big company, you're doing your own thing. Here's where I think some of the entrepreneurial stuff came in. Very cool. A lot of you are listening about or hearing about batteries today, right? Battery storage. Batteries are everything, right? For electric vehicles. I drove an electric vehicle in 1994. It was prototype. It was for Ford. I was in drive systems, so it was motors and drives, okay? We stuck a drive and an electric motor into a Ford, I even forget the make of the vehicle. And before we even figured out, because I was in a specialty group, it was government and special projects was the actual division that I was in. We did all kinds of somewhat cool stuff. And so I drove an electric vehicle in 1992. We stuck it in there, the engineers put it all in. Now this was long before they figured out electric motors are pretty powerful things. We probably had, I remember it was a 300 horsepower motor. But if you don't control the motor properly, I got a chance to step into this thing and put on the gas, and my head hit because we had no sense of how fast this thing could be. So it was one of the fastest cars I've ever driven, and that was only a few hundred yards. We took it to the airport and on the runway to test it out, and that was pretty cool. But batteries, even though they're all the rage today, and Elon Musk with his wall of batteries, they're still having a lot of issues, but I thought that battery energy storage was something that was on the cusp, and we were using these very large, old-fashioned, essentially lead-acid batteries, the oldest technology around. But I actually led our entry. I contacted Sandia National Laboratories. They were part of the Department of Energy at the time, and they were research. And I applied for and became the project leader on an interesting program where we used our equipment, which I'm not going to get technical on you, but basically changed AC to DC and back to AC, right? The converters that we all use and plug into the wall to charge an iPhone, that's a converter. It doesn't go both ways, and it's not active, and it's very tiny. It's only charging your, lightning port on your phones. But these were huge, cabinets that would fit this wall. They were, medium voltage. They were huge things. And we actually put a battery energy storage system on an island in Alaska. Have you ever heard of Ketchikan? Anybody who heard of Ketchikan, Alaska knows it from a cruise ship. Cruise ships all stop there. But off the island of Ketchikan, there's a little island called Metlakatla, and they harvested Sitka spruce trees. The spruce was well known for its musical qualities. They would make all the highest end violins and highest end pianos were made with this special Sitka spruce that was only harvested in this particular area of Alaska. So this little island had a big, huge saw. And the whole island, it could run on hydro because it had enough water and wave power, but it could not have enough electricity to saw the big logs. So it had a diesel generator. Imagine, pristine, beautiful island in the southwestern part of Alaska, and you got this diesel generator running 100% of the time. For every time they put one of these logs that was probably 4 feet in diameter through the saw, and all the lights on the island would dim because that's how much energy it took. They had hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel sitting on this beautiful island, pristine. And that's not a very environmentally good thing, right? So what we did, and this is very cool and kind of gave me the very first idea of entrepreneurship, again, because I'm the one who came up with the idea that our product could actually help this, and they were fishing around for some supplier who could do it. We ended up putting, it's a 1 megawatt. That's a lot of energy. A megawatt will power about 1,000 homes, okay? Just to give you an example. We put, it was almost a football field's worth of batteries. That's why battery technology never went anywhere, because these are huge, big batteries. But it was much better than a few 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel. And this battery energy storage system is still working today. I checked it out not that long ago. It's still working 25, 26 years later, something like that. And every time, basically the hydro that was on the island, all night long, we'd feed the batteries. So it turned the water power into DC and stuck it in the batteries. And then during the day, when they wanted to run the saw, every single time that saw hit the tree, all the spike, it was like a huge spike. If you saw this like a heart, it would look like a heartbeat, right? Guess what? All the power came from the batteries. And even though the saw only would work maybe once every 10 minutes, so it'd be a big pulse. And nobody on the island anymore had to experience their lights dimming, because the system we were able to put in was able to handle it. And it's quiet, no diesel generator anymore. So I thought it was pretty cool. It's still a cool project. I can talk about it all day long. You know, part of the reason, first time I ever took a commercial sail plane, a plane that lands pontoon plane. Commercial, yeah, I had a ticket because you could take a ferry out to Metlakatla, but you couldn't get there in a couple hours. I needed to get there in a short time, so that was my first time ever on a sail plane. I was sitting next to the pilot, you know, me and the pilot. It was kind of cool. So entrepreneurial piece is to see something, and I definitely had to get permission, but it was more than permission. GE wanted that prestige. They wanted to be on the forefront. But had I not thought about it, had I not looked at the technology we had I not, kind of put it all together, it would have just gone by. I'm not sure if another company would have done it. They were just fishing for, is there anybody out there who could do this? That's what the government does. They throw out these feelers. They got paid for the system, probably, made a little bit of money. I think it was about $1.5 million for a system that we put in, but it was more about the prestige and the fact that it proved the concept. Today, in 2023, we're still waiting for the batteries to catch up to be able to do that in other parts of the world. So here I am in GE, and I got my first taste of entrepreneurship. By that time, I had several friends bail from the big company, very extreme pressures and structure. I'd already had several friends bail and go start their own companies. A couple of them I know are retired, very, very comfortable by now, today. Okay, so that kind of gave me a, ooh, why? Let's do that. So anyway, I left GE. I actually came back here to Connecticut, up in Plainville, not too far. It was a GE headquarters of one of their, at that time, they had 12 businesses. And you had to be number one or number two in your business, in GE at the time, or you were gone. GE would sell the business if you weren't number one or number two in the world. Okay, this was the electrical distribution and control side of the business. I was there as a national account person, so I made large deals for things like paper mills and steel mills and other things. Very cool. Intel, everybody knows Intel. They still make chips that run a lot of what we use today. I coordinated Intel. I was a national account manager for Intel worldwide because we had people in Ireland, Malaysia, Arizona, those three. We built a plant for Intel, and it looked similar in Ireland, Arizona, and Malaysia. And it was trying to deal with each of the different people, each of the different project teams in each part of the world. Completely different electrical standards and all this. But basically, it's like herding cats to a degree, making sure that technically everything was the same. And I was very proud to be part of a team that won an award from Intel as a preferred quality supplier. So I learned a lot about negotiation there. Very small and very important thing for my life right now. I met my wife during that time. My wife is a Fascia daughter, and when I first met her, I didn't know who Fascia's was. I grew up here. Fascia's is as old as I am, but I left to go to college long before I knew what good chocolate was. So I didn't know anything. And my wife's, I meet her, and she says, "Yeah, Fascia, and my family makes chocolate." Oh, never heard of it. Sorry. I still get that today from people who want to raise in Waterbury, so I don't hold a grudge about that because I was that way. So I learned a little bit about the family. I married my wife and then said to her, well, we got to move. My next job was to run a manufacturing facility in North Carolina. So GE is up or out. You're either gonna, if you're on a particular track, if you are those high potential people that they identify, you're either taking the next job they give you or you're gone. There are times you can say, I like it here, I want to step aside and become one of those great producers that just turn the crank every day. That's not fun. You always want to be challenged. If you're that kind of person, you want to be challenged. So I moved to North Carolina. Mebane, North Carolina was heart of ACC country for basketball fans here, right? I was like 2 miles from Duke University, and it was all good. It's fun. My daughter was born down there 24 years ago. That 2 years go by, I run this facility and did a lot of good things there. We introduced the new product line and stuff like that. But you know what? Actually, Dr. Bauer, we were just talking about number one or number two. It had to do with people too. Jack Welch at the time was very, very unforgiving environment to be in when you were told there were A players, B players, and C players. You can't have all A players. They just wouldn't allow it. You had to stratify your people if you were a manager. And you had to get rid of the bottom, no matter how good they were. Well, I had a guy work, in this little facility, I had an influence on a lot of places, but I had 6 direct reports, 6 people. And one guy was deemed, he's the C player guy. He's the guy you got to get rid of. And this guy was great at what he did. He didn't pal around with a lot of people in the facility. He was a little bit of an odd duck, but the customers loved him. The people who went to him for advice and stuff, because he was a technical expert. He was a guy who said, this is what you want to do? Okay, this is what you do it with. He was loved by them, and I knew it. And one of the hardest battles of my whole career was being told you got to fire that guy because he's the worst guy on your team. Never mind, he was. So you did what? Anybody ever heard of a 360-degree review? That's something you did. It's when you took a person and you got their peers, their boss, and their customers, or their direct reports, or both. So it'd be several degrees, basically a full view of a person. So luckily, you didn't have one person saying, I don't like him, get rid of him. So what I had was the upper management, my boss, telling me that guy's no good. I had his peers saying, he's pretty good. They didn't maybe interact with him a lot. He wasn't a good old Southern boy, by the way. So that's probably one of the problems. I had to learn Southern speak, by the way, in Virginia and North Carolina, being an Italian from Connecticut. I had to learn how to, speak Southern. But he wasn't a good old boy. But his customers love him. Our field salespeople, they absolutely love them. So one of the hardest battles of my whole career was keeping his career, and it worked. And that's probably the time that I soured on huge companies big time, because just as I'm thinking about or being told, you got to move again, here's some choices. I'd already moved to North Carolina. My wife had already been, she'd never been away from home. And so we were looking at, oh, we can go to here, there, and none of them were really appealing. And at the same time, some headhunter. Have you heard the word headhunter? Headhunters exist anymore? I don't think so. All right. So back in the day, before there was LinkedIn, before there was any social media, before there was anything, there were the recruiters. We call them headhunters. Okay. And if you were a big company and you wanted to find talent, there was no internet posting. There was nothing. And especially if you want to find talent and you don't want to tell anybody you were finding talent. Imagine that. You needed these recruiters, headhunters, affectionately called headhunters, who their trade was calling people, knowing people, who's good, who's not. So I got a call one day. Yeah, we're recruiting for a position. It's up in Massachusetts. It's, I was going to replace somebody, so they were obviously being very coy about it. But I got to get a call from the headhunter. Okay. And again, I'm looking at moving to a place I'm not really sure I want to move. And Massachusetts, hey, that's not far from Connecticut. And I went to school there, so this would look like a good place to be. And this company was a very small, $900 million, fourth generation family company. A company called Simplex Time Recorder. Probably don't know Simplex. I guarantee there's only less than 5 people in this room who've ever punched a punch card. Yeah, I know. I know. And myself included. But that's what they made their trade in. But they are, and still are, one of the premier security companies in the world. Security and so fire alarm panels, and any building you see a panel, some of them, a lot of them say Simplex. And so I went to there to be a national, I was the director of national accounts there. And helping them, and one of the jobs that I took on was changing their compensation system, because people in the field were going to the companies that they're salespeople. They would go what we call milk run. They take the big companies, they make big, huge money in commissions on the big companies and never call on the small companies. And who was going to, but they had territories. So they wouldn't be happy if somebody came into their territory and sold within them. They wanted it all for themselves. So they were fat cats. And the young salespeople had nowhere to go. So I helped them change their compensation where, no, you can call on your big companies, but you name names and that's who all you get. But within within your local area. So it was a major change, doing it in a company that was a family-run business that had a lot of old style. That was a very eye-opening experience. If you've ever heard of Tyco, and I think everybody here has heard of ADT, right? Okay, so we ended up getting purchased by Tyco. And Tyco, ADT, the security part of ADT, and the part of Simplex, Grinnell at the time, were going to be merged. And I didn't want to go to Boca Raton, Florida, where ADT people were going to run the national account piece. And again, geography. By this time, I had 2 children. One was born in North Carolina, one was born in Massachusetts, and decided I don't want to go to Florida. So we moved back here to Waterbury, Connecticut here, and I didn't have a job. I said, okay, it's fine. It was a severance. I wasn't put on the street. They said, if you're not going to take the job to move to Florida, 6 months severance. Have you heard of severance? There are not a lot of severance packages out there these days, but luckily I had 6 months of time to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. So coming from GE, I want to just contrast this. I spent 13 years in this large corporation with a lot of people that you were competing with. your own brethren, because it was that kind of environment. And then I moved to this lollygagging family business that had been pretty easy. I flew in a corporate jet in that company. They owned their own company plane. And I was able to fly in a corporate jet a couple times. Not all the time, but I got to go with the president and we flew cross country. I literally flew from Massachusetts to LA, stopping twice, and twice on the way back. We did a tour of the country. And that was kind of cushy and cool. I like that. But so contrast that, so I come back to this company that, I hate to say it, but I could run circles around most of the people that I was even working for. Right? They were lazy. They were very soft. It wasn't that environmental. It wasn't that environment where everybody was competitive. So I kind of stood out a bit, and pretty good. I mean, I didn't rub anybody the wrong way. I made good friends there, but I realized that I had come from a very, very tough proving ground. You don't realize it when you're in it. GE, I'm talking about. So I keep referring to it, but it's an indelible part of my career, who I am. It just happens that way. So I'm here now, I'm in Connecticut, looking for a job. I go to Fascia's Chocolates. My in-laws own this business, right? And they were now on, does anybody know where Ocean State Job Lots is off of Lakewood Road? Well, back there used to be a skating rink, and Fascia's Chocolates was sitting right next to the skating rink. And it was a nice little business. My in-laws were at that time, 20 years ago, they were 68 and 64 years old, still running the business. It was nice. They would actually close the month of July. And that's the way chocolate business is, because it's a very cyclical business. So back then, again, recruiting was a completely different thing. You sent paper, resumes, and cover letters to a company with a stamp. We were emailing by 20 years ago, but still, it was a very different world to search for a job. So you can't do that every day, all day. You got to do something. It takes time for the mail. It takes time. I was making calls, not off my cell phone. I mean, I still had a roll of debt. Literally, by that time I did have a BlackBerry, but calling friends and networking and doing this kind of stuff to get a job. And I had actually gotten an offer from GE back where I was. I didn't want to go back for the reasons I've been trying to tell you. So I hooked up with this small company. Anybody know the Timex Integral watch? Right. You press the button? No, nobody wears watches anymore. Timex, they made watches. The Integral watch was electroluminescent lighting, phosphors that glowed when you had a little electricity on them. And the company that I was recruited to be the vice president of sales and marketing, tiny little company, was a spin-off of Timex. They made electroluminescent lighting. Right? It was glow in the dark when you put electricity on it. So imagine ribbons of light on a roll, and you could light it up. There's nothing like this anywhere else. Now the problem was it turned green. It was green when it was off. Or, excuse me. Yeah, it was green when it was off, or white when it was off, green when it was lit. So that green light wasn't always great, but we could make it white light, except it was pink when it was off. Had to do with the colorization of the phosphors. So you have this pink light that turned white. It was beautiful when it was on, and it looked ugly when it was off. We used it for a lot of cool things. You could do it for billboards and taxis and things like that. It was used in some very cool decorative sets, actually here locally in Connecticut, back in the day when ESPN was still relatively small. We installed some lighting on several sets on ESPN. One day, I'm literally installing. I'm the vice president of sales and marketing, but it's a 10-person company, so you do a little bit of everything. And because I'm an electrical engineer, I kind of knew how to do some of this stuff. So I go to ESPN to install a strip of light on this desk, and I'm underneath plugging in the power supply and wiring up the power supply, and I back up and I hit this guy, and it's Chris Berman. Anybody remember who Chris Berman is? He was the Scott Van Pelt of today. At Sports Center, he was the guy. And that was kind of cool to bump into Chris Berman. He says, am I gonna get electrocuted? I'm like, nope, I promise you won't. So this little company was kind of cool, had some very interesting applications, but something called 9/11 took place. You guys remember, some of you do, 9/11, right? We had this trade centers go down, and one of the things that that came from the trade center bombing, or the buildings, is all the smoke, the darkness. People could not find their way out. And we, at that time, this strip of light, we could actually make glow very brightly, and we could make it in thin, tiny little strips. So we decided to go into that business and do low path lighting. If you ever go on a cruise ship, most of the time you will see low path lighting because it's actually a requirement on most marine applications. So cruise ship has these low level exit signs and pathways and markings, but it's all glow in the dark stuff. It's stuff that you could, it absorbs light and then it glows in the dark. And that doesn't last very long and it's not very bright. We could do it with electricity and fire up a light. So we decided now I'm kind of back to my original, technology. I knew a lot about code. I knew a lot about electricity, obviously, and code and how buildings got put together and stuff like that. So we birthed a company called IllumiPath. We called the product IllumiPath, and it was emergency egress lighting. And we literally started from scratch because there was nothing like this. Nobody else had this product. So we're starting to go and tell people about it. We got through a couple of contacts. There was a guy named Larry Silverstein. Google him. He was very rich, very, very, very prominent developer. And 7 World Trade Center was the very first building that was built after Trade Center fell. 7 World. There's a bunch of them now, right? The Freedom Tower is 1 World Trade Center. 7 World Trade Center was the very first building that ever got built off that after the tragedy that took place. And we were able to convince Larry Silverstein to put this emergency egress path lighting in a stairwell in 7 World Trade Center. So that was putting us on the map, because to be able to do that, he bought into this idea. So we had, don't hold me to it, I think it's a 52-story building, somewhere in that range. So we got 50 stairwells, 50 floors worth of this lighting. And that was interesting. I learned a lot about unions at that point because I'm trying to help and do things down there because they never looked at this stuff. The electricians were union electricians. I'm trying to help them. And I had to be careful. I couldn't lift a screwdriver. They wouldn't let me do anything. It's kind of strange, but hey, that's the way it worked down there. So by the end of the project, I knew what I couldn't do. I drank a lot of coffee watching people on that project when I could have been helping, but so it's a little side thing. So here I am. Again, I want to talk about entrepreneurial piece of it. It was really not anything that I thought of. I didn't know I was being entrepreneurial, but we took this little company that had this fun part of it. It was cool. Like I said, the lighting part of it, we did a lot of different fun stuff, but I like the idea of going into the emergency egress path lighting. It was going to save lives. And I did a bunch of testimony here in Connecticut, and the legislature at the time, we did pass a law to have certain types of occupancies have low-level path lighting. And it was generic. They wouldn't just do it once, because we were the only product that could do what we do, so we couldn't have our product written into code. You guys could understand that, right? Nobody would want to make, well, we play favorites a lot in our government today, but that's a whole different story. At least we had a law that said you had to have some low path lighting in certain types of occupancies, like hotels and things like that. So it's there today. Unfortunately, it's not a lot of our stuff because it was a family business. Father and son. Father was the original Timex employee. Son was, how would I say this nicely? I don't have to be nice, right? The son did not know, he had a little silver spoon. How about that? He never had to work too hard, didn't really understand anything technical, I didn't see him very much. He was the president of the company, but I didn't see him very much. He was out on the golf course most of the time. Father and son became bitter enemies and started fighting each other in court over the company. And I and the other two main technology guys tried to buy the company from them as they were fighting each other, okay? And so it was a little bit difficult to get out of there. And we made an offer for the company. We had a guy who was worth a few $100 million back us, and we made an offer. And it was just going to be such a hard thing. They wouldn't give up any percentages. They were fighting each other in court. And all of this time, another headhunter calls and says, this company's up in Torrington, Connecticut. Company in the Midwest just bought them. They need somebody to run it. You want to do it? I had no choice. I had it. I mean, I loved what I had done. I put 70, 80 hours a week and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this idea, but I just had to do it for my family. So I went and became the general manager of a manufacturing company up in Torrington. And now I'm kind of back in, this was a family business, by the way, as well. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, family business. The son is now the new guy in charge. Father, technically retired, still had a seat on the board, gave the son the ability to just run the company. And I'm hired to run it. That was kind of compatible with what they did. And they're a $200 million company. That's not small. You know, I mean, coming from a couple $1 million company, it was a bigger company. And I'm going to run a division that's maybe 55 people and maybe doing about $10 million worth of business. So that's not small. That's a decent sized company. So I'm like, hey, this is cool. This is good. When they offered me the job, I went through all kinds of battery tests and, you know, several interviews and stuff. They offered me the job to be the general manager. I said, I will join, except I want a severance package written. If anything happens to my job in 2 years, I want a severance package. We're very, very appalled at that. But I'm like, look, in 2 years' time, you just rip this thing up. If everything is stable, but you know what? You're still finding yourself. And I'd already seen family businesses. The Simplex one sold to Tyco. I saw father and son fight each other in court, and I'm seeing this one. So I'm just smart enough to watch out for myself and say, hey, I want to come in and do this. So that's what I did. They gave me a severance package. So I'm running this company, and it's obvious that there's not a lot of cohesiveness back at headquarters. I'm here in Torrington. They're all in Minnesota. So it's not really like I have to answer too much, except I had to fly back to Minnesota about a week every 2 months, sit there and do the board meetings and stuff like that. Well, about a year into my time there, the father decides to fire his son. He was probably 72 at the time, fires his son and takes over the company again, president and CEO, and calls me to Minnesota, summoned to Minnesota, and he says, my son should have never bought your business. I want out. Okay, we'll get you out. Now, I'm going to rewind. What am I here for? Fascia's Chocolates. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. While I'm running this company, while I'm flying out to Minnesota, my mother and father-in-law are now 79 and 73 and 69 running their business. 10 years later, they're running their business, thinking about retiring, trying to retire. They got notice from their landlord that they had 60-day notice to move. This is 2008. Okay. Think about this. They're running the business. They know they need to retire. When you own a small business, you need an exit plan. You need something. They were just running it. They thought about selling. They tried. Actually, there was one inquiry. They thought about hiring somebody to run it for them. And all of a sudden they had this move. I'm running the other company. This is all happening simultaneously. We moved them into Thomaston Avenue, not too far from where we are today. And I'm getting told we need to get out of the business that you're in, all pretty much kind of in that same year. And I'm saying, okay, I will help you move the business. My severance package is going to kick in. And that's when I started convincing my wife that we should be in the chocolate business. And this is a micro business now. This is a very, very, very small business. In fact, my salary was probably half of what the business's revenues were, Fascia's revenues were. That's how small it was. And I realized it was going to be starting from scratch. I'm 44 years old at this time. I have kids that are 8 and 10. You got to start saving for college. You got to start doing all that stuff. And long story short, I won the argument with my wife. My wife did not want, she had a love-hate relationship with the business because she grew up with it. It's a very seasonal business, very difficult to run. It was all family, and she didn't want to depend on family business. She knew growing up, her mom and dad, talk about work all the time. It was in their house for 21 years. So I convinced her that we should be in the chocolate business, okay? So that's kind of where I want to. Can we play that video right up to the time? I just have a little video here now. Just this morning, whoever, you want to go ahead and start? Oh, she's going to do it. Okay. I'm going to play a little video. This was done by Ion Bank 5 years ago. It's just a nice little capsule of the business, so I don't have to go through it. You might as well see it. You're tired of me talking, so at least you get a little, you can look at some chocolate here, okay? Here we go. This was done 5 years ago by Ion Bank. We were in a commercial that they featured, and this was the 4-minute version. Oh. Okay. Actually, just today, this morning, before I left here, we were meeting with a gentleman. We have a script written. We are going to create our own history of Fascias. My mother and father-in-law are now 83.
Fascia's Chocolate started in the basement of my mother and father-in-law, John and Helen Fascia's home.
We needed money because we had 1 bathroom, 1 car, and 4 ladies. So things were pretty tough. And instead of going out and getting a job in a gas station or something, I says, I'll do something myself.
He started selling nuts to his coworkers. And somebody said, hey, why don't you put chocolate with that? And he did.
We bought a machine to melt all the chocolate.
We tempered it and started to make lollipops. And then we started to make some bars.
Then it started to snowball. It just kept growing. It wasn't too easy, let me put it that way.
Working 2 jobs, a full-time job to care for the family in a factory, and nights and weekends to grow his chocolate dream. It took 21 years for this business to become something that they could live on. We go through tens of thousands of pounds of chocolate a year, and that is our base chocolate, producing well over 100,000 pounds of finished product each year. We have over 100 varieties of chocolate that we make, different recipes, different flavors, milk and dark combinations. We do use a very, very high quality chocolate, but it's what you do with it and how you do it, using time-honored traditions, old-fashioned hand methods. We're making our cream centers with a piece of equipment that's almost 100 years old. The company who made it hasn't even been in business for almost 50 years. You can't rush things if you want to get a high-quality product. And there's a lot to be said for the passion and the time that we use to make things.
That's my son and my father-in-law.
We're small, and we don't have the size to compete with other companies in a retail space, so I decided that experiencing your chocolate was going to be important. We've enjoyed a pretty far-reaching clientele. We've had people come from all over the country. A lot of that was due to the fact that a few years ago we were named in Food Magazine as the top chocolate shop in Connecticut. And we are a top attraction at TripAdvisor and with great reviews on Yelp and Google. So we've drawn people from a pretty wide area. As we near our 5th anniversary in this building, we are well over 30,000 visitors at this point, translating to roughly 6,000 to 7,000 people a year. We have the train stopping here for shopping excursions. We have groups that charter the train to come here. And we also run a chocolate decadence tour, chocolate and wine pairing on a train. We sell out just about every one we run. What I see for Fascia's chocolates in the future is just more people aware of who we are. I do want to make Fascia's chocolates available in more places, more retail partners, and I would love to add a mobile component, a chocolate truck to join the food truck craze. We invite everybody to come experience your chocolate here at Fascia's. You're going to see history, you're going to see family, you're going to see fun, and of course, wonderful product at the same time.
So that's a good, quick overview of the business, and that's 5 years ago. So it's interesting for me to look at it from 5 years ago. I said we wanted to make it available in more places, and we've been doing that. One of the things I was very concentrating on was packaging of our product, the ability to merchandise the product and able to stick it in places. My son is in the business full-time. He graduated a year ago from UConn. He was stayed at the branch. He put himself through school. Part of the problem of doing what I did 14 years ago is kids had to be on their own for school. My daughter and my son both put themselves through school. I didn't pay a dime yet for any schooling. They did it themselves. My son was working for Fascia's during this time. He would help with the wholesale side of the business. I had grown it enough, but I couldn't grow it anymore because I couldn't do the deliveries. I couldn't do that kind of stuff. So his college job was delivering chocolate and taking care of the customers and growing. And I was able to sell more, put on a few more. Since he graduated a year ago, we have skyrocketed the number of locations we sell. And we have 90 locations now that sell our chocolate. They're grocery stores, they're things like that. He just told me our January, February numbers year over year for wholesale, we're 60% ahead of where we were last year, which is good. It's still a small number, but it's where the business is going to go, and we're going to keep doing that. We are still growing the business. We had a decent run. We have 34 employees now, 8 full-time, about a dozen to 15 that I would call regular part-time. They're maybe not full-time people, but they're there 20, 30 hours a week, and they're critical to running our business. I'm doing things internally to make the business run more like a business. Think about, back when I was, 58, I told you that. 30 years ago, I would make 2 sales in a year equal to what Fascia's makes today in a whole year. So it's still a very, very small business for me, for my purposes, as far as, dollars, but it's not about dollars. It's, we have 3 generations working together. We are growing something. I'm putting processes in place, things that I learned over my whole career, manufacturing terms that I could throw at you like Kanban and other things, but we're doing things internal to the business to make it run like a business. I'm very happy to say that over the last 3 to 4 years, I've finally been able to step away. The business can run without me for days. Can't go much more than that. I do all the books and the bookkeeping, and I still get many people. But today, most people run to me with a question, and I tell them, don't you already know the answer? Or that's not my decision to make. It's somebody else's decision. So that's the big change, is that I am delegating. I'm only delegating as much as I know the people can handle. And I would give us, as a business performance, I would give us maybe a B+, A- in performance, which is pretty good. But I would actually say on a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably only at a 5 or 6 as to what we could be. So we're performing well for what we are. We're nowhere near what I want us to be in terms of operating like a world-class business. But one of the terms I learned way back when in GE was to be patiently impatient, meaning, there's always time to do it, but you got to do it right or don't do it at all. You can go too fast on certain things and not have the base. So it's like a house of cards that can tumble. So with that, time-wise, I know we're there, and I want to answer questions. I know I've talked I talked way more than I thought I was going to, but okay.
Thank you.
Anybody questions? Especially from, how do we get questions from me?
So they can just
They
put
can
them in the
okay.
chat. Yeah. Feel free for the folks online to, if you want to raise your hand and speak out loud, or you can just put it in the chat.
Yes, yeah.
I have a question. So when you decided to work with your family, how exactly did you start? Okay, you guys have this business. Let's see how we can make it better and stuff like that. When did you get to that point where it was like, all right,
It was hard.
I'm serious about this. We're doing this.
It was very hard, to be honest. I had butted some heads with my father-in-law early on because he didn't want to give it up, but I think I played it right. I think I was very gentle and got a lot of consensus, and I couldn't act. My wife still accuses me of being in work mode, and she'll even say GE mode sometimes, because she knows that back in the day I could pound my fist and make people do things. You can't do that with family. So we've largely been able to succeed. I still have to be careful that I'm not in work mode. She's my wife. She's the boss. But sometimes I know better.
Another question I had was when going to because I want to have a business with my family as well. My dad wants me to help him start a truck business. So my thing is when starting business, what is the process that you do to go to
You know what? The most important thing I can tell people is you can do it two ways. You can do it through your own blood, sweat, and tears and grow organically a little bit at a time, but it's so hard to do. Financing is the most important thing. Get a bank to believe in your vision and health. Maybe they're not going to give you all the money you asked for. Ion Bank did that video because they were the only bank out of 5 who gave me a loan to buy a building when I say out of 5, I literally did a business plan and went to 5 banks back 10 years ago when I wanted to buy the building I'm in. They're the only ones who gave me a loan. Not like I chose between banks. I was kind of desperate at that point, but they believed in my business plan and they've been rewarded for it. Why? How they've been rewarded? Because I've refinanced with them. I've expanded my business with them. And not that I don't love the other banks. I have good friends that are CEOs of most of the banks, but they're not going to get my business because they didn't believe in me early on. So my number one thing, have a good plan. Don't overinflate, because that's what I didn't do. That's why I was successful in proving to Ion Bank that I can do what I did, because I didn't. And I have done business plans in my past where there's some number fudging going on. You know what you want the answer to be, so you delude yourself into thinking, I'm going to have this many sales, and my costs are going to be this, and the business plan looks great, and then you get to reality, and it's not. So I did my business plan completely conservative on the revenues, completely, worst case on the expenses over a 5-year period, and then I put them together and saw this could work. I didn't have to fudge any numbers, and I believe in it. And you know what I had to do? My house. I had to take out a life insurance policy on myself, and my house was pledged to the bank. Putting it on the line. That's putting it on the line. I did it. It's still there, actually. Actually, when I refinanced the loan, I didn't have to have my life insurance with the bank as a designee anymore. So that's still there. Yes.
Do you do business outside of Connecticut?
So yes, we do. We ship all over the country. And we now have some wholesale in other, we're all in New England states right now.
I'm not sure if chocolate is necessarily a commodity, but
It is.
How do you look at differentiation in places that don't really care that you're a Connecticut-based business? Because in Connecticut, you could say we're Connecticut-based.
Just don't sell it. Don't worry about. We're being somewhat picky at who sells our chocolate. We're not letting everybody sell our chocolate.
Okay.
So it is a commodity. There's definitely differences between Hershey's and Mars, and when you get to Fascia's level. But there are other great confectioners out there. So we're not trying to be nationwide, and we're not even really trying to be regional. We're trying to be as good as we can be and have as many places in Connecticut and locally, because we're serving them by delivering and we're not shipping stuff all over the place. We're delivering it by hand. My son was just off today. He's setting up racks at stores, Easter stuff at a store. We got white glove service for the people. So we're differentiating ourselves with service. It's a great product. That's the one thing I never try to sell anybody is how good our product is. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit, please, about your marketing plan? and how it's changed, especially with social media now and everything?
We've gone away from print. Still a lot of beautiful magazines out there and really great, but we've kind of gone away from print. We put some ads. I have my plan for the print newspaper, Wonder Republican American, but the marketing really, really has changed to, again, social media and experiential stuff. I mean, the one thing we did right was decide that we could market. I can market to each of you and say, come have a good time at Fascia's with chocolate. And you might actually listen to that because it's kind of cool and a little bit unique. So you can actually come to Fascia's. I can probably get you to do that with the right marketing versus come buy my product. I don't ask anybody to buy my product. I just ask them to come to my shop and have a good time. That's easier sell. So that's actually the whole thing about social media. And again, figuring out what the right, we all know, and we don't want to make it a marketing class, but we know what Facebook is good for. We know what Instagram is good for. TikTok has got its issues, but anybody know Google Shorts? That's the next frontier. Google's going to try to take over where TikTok is. And we're going to start creating some Google Shorts, which are essentially short videos, because Google's pumping tons of money into promoting shorts. I don't know if anybody's gotten any shorts, Forrest Adam, but I can tell you that. Why? Because I went to a chamber event and talked to somebody who knows a lot about digital marketing. So that's how I get my marketing. I'm not smart enough to know that. I'm just repeating something I heard 2 days ago. Yes.
Well, but if no one else has, when you took over the family business, you've alluded to it being very different from GE. Did you have any corporate baggage of how you ran things that you had to overcome and sort of run things differently from a culture perspective?
I had to throw it up. I had completely changed my work mode. Not my attitude. I mean, I have a pretty high work ethic, but I still have a tone of voice. I don't yell. I don't raise my voice. It's very, very rare that I raise my voice, but I happen to have a way of tone that really is fighting, and that gets out every once in a while. And we're all humans, right?
Yeah.
So I had to pretty much leave it all. I had been softened though over the years. If I had tried to move into this business from GE, I gave a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to other people. You got to realize, I realize not everybody's the employee that I was. Finding people who care, I've got a few, but there are many people who are in it just for the job. And guess what? As an owner of a business, you can tell absolutely who's there for the paycheck and who cares. It's an attitude thing that performance does not even come into it. It's an attitude thing. And as a business owner, I had to realize that not everybody cared. And that was a big, huge revelation to me, that not everybody cared. Anybody else?
I have a question. So Fascia is a brand, and you're constantly managing that brand. Not everybody in here is going to be an entrepreneur. However, they all have a brand. Can you speak to the importance of managing a brand, whether it's a company brand or a professional, personal brand?
You wouldn't believe how much back room, locker room talk there is in the world. Just look at yourself, right? We all talk about people and realize that, especially when you get into any kind of a public thing, any community, any room, any networking, that, you know, you are your brand. So you want to hope that when you leave any kind of interaction with people that their impression was good guy, he cared, knew who I was, whatever. So that's important. Looking people in the eye. I mean, it's that simple. Looking people in the eye, making them feel important, that they were the thing that you were, you know, that you weren't just blowing by them. That's important for your personal brand. For your company brand, wow, it just takes social media issues, social trolls, one comment out there. That's really hard. It's really devastating to have something that was not based in fact at all get thrown out. Luckily, we haven't had much of that. But you know what? We had a political candidate for office stop by not that long ago, and a picture got taken, and all of a sudden, people who weren't of that political party were trolls like you can't believe. If the candidate from the other party showed up, I would have asked them to come in and show them around too. But that's one of the, so managing our brand, we don't want to be aligned, certainly politically, anywhere. But that just happened, and I couldn't help it. I can post a picture, I can take a picture or post a picture. Yeah, we welcome them in. So anyway, that's as far as I'll go with politics. Anybody else? Okay. I've had hundreds of post students come to Fascia's. You know, Melissa Santos, touch base with her. We just had somebody last week. So we've had hundreds because we've had dozens of those groups and averaging about 10. So I've had a close relationship with the university for a long time. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking me in. Hopefully it was what you expect.
Absolutely. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for all the